Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Bitter, and I want to welcome everyone to this episode of the show. As a way to thank the listeners for helping me grow this podcast over the years, I'm going to continue a raffle option for all of you to have a chance to win a free consultation with me. So it's a 30-minute consultation that I will raffle off once per month. All you have to do to enter is share the episodes that you enjoy on whatever platform you find most interesting. The only thing I ask you to do is, if it's a social media channel, make sure you tag me so I see it and can save that and enter in the raffle. Or if it's somewhere else that you can't tag me at, take a screenshot and send that to me at hpopodcast@gmail.com. You can also enter the raffle by writing a show review on your favorite podcast listening platform. So if you do that, take the screenshot, send it to hpopodcast@gmail.com, and I will enter you in that monthly raffle. The raffle winner for May is Julian Koyu. Julian won by sharing an episode on Instagram stories. Thanks for doing that, Julian. I will reach out to you on Instagram. Also, I'm excited to announce that I launched a new group coaching option. So to go along with my personalized one-on-one coaching options and my pre-made plans that I have on my website at zachbitter.com, this year I'm starting a group of online endurance runners who want to work with me in a slightly different model. So this model is set up so that whether you're a beginner or advanced, you can join. Whether you're training for something like a 5K or something as far as a 200 plus miler, you are welcome, and this setup will help you reach your goals. The way I have it set up is, if you subscribe, you will have access to my full catalog of training plans, which range from beginner 5K all the way up to advanced 200 plus miles. Along with that plan that you're going to use, you will have access to a weekly group meeting where you can ask questions about training. You can ask about adjustments to the plan to make it more personalized to you. You can engage with the other group members if you want. We'll get you all set up and ready to really personalize that plan to make sure that you're heading in the right direction for your event. Also, you will have access to office hours, where if you have something you want to ask and you want to just hop in and ask a question, you'll be given access to that as well. I will be bringing in guest speakers who have a deep understanding of specific topics and things that we'll use to better your training and recovery process throughout the course of the year, as well as a private forum for all the members to engage with one another, share stories, share training tips, and just house a lot of the information that we'll go over on the daily and weekly basis as you're pursuing your race goals. So if you're interested in checking that out, just head to my website at zachbitter.com, go to the coaching tab. From there, you'll be directed to the team coaching option, and you can sign up for that and get onboarded to join the group. If you're interested in keeping up with what I'm up to, please give me a follow on some of my socials. Follow me on Instagram at ZachBitter, on X, Twitter at ZBitter, and check out the brand new HPO podcast handles, which are just at HPO Podcast on Instagram and X/Twitter. Of course, all this stuff can be found quite easily on my website, which is the main landing page for everything I do at zachbitter.com. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Bitter, and today I have a topic episode for you. I teased this one a little bit in the past. It is my strength routine. So I recently released for episode 394 my mobility routine, and that episode is basically just, I wanted to highlight to people like what exactly are all the inputs at a little bit of a deeper level for how I approach mobility in my training. It's not to say that it's something where you should just take that as a blueprint and do it yourself, but I think it does highlight some aspects of the value of mobility and where that kind of fits within a well-structured endurance training plan for people who are interested in kind of understanding mobility and its role. And then there probably are some takeaway movements that are a little bit more or less sort of specific to runners in general in terms of what we tend to deal with in terms of areas that are more common to be addressed and areas of weaknesses when it comes to mobility and things like that. So what I wanted to do is follow up that episode with another one that does sort of the same thing, but with my strength routine, because it has been something that I have emphasized a fair bit more over the last few years. And it's something where I say now is a non-negotiable. I've always been someone who's been interested in strength work. I've never had a hard time in terms of enjoying the strength work component to endurance, but it hasn't ever been something where I would necessarily say like, all right, this is as firm and as strict and as consistent as the running inputs have been. Whereas I've sort of shifted to a point where now when I have a strength routine in place or a process for what I want to do within that side of things, it's a non-negotiable. It's on the plan. It's going to get done when to the same degree and consistency as the running workouts, and I find that helps keep the running workouts consistent. Go figure. So here we go. I'm going to outline kind of how I break things down and then share with you kind of the movements that I have been focusing on right now. These things are somewhat fluid. There are other movements that I will do that I'm not going to talk about today for things like when I'm traveling and don't have access to the same resources, or just in general that I'll kind of like phase in and out more frequently, or I will phase in and out, so they're kind of a little more seasonal or just a little more or a little less specific versus the things that are kind of like the core foundational elements of my strength program that I follow throughout the course of the year. So I sort of break it down into kind of a couple categories, or a few categories actually. One is like lower body. So I'll have like a lower body day where my movements are going to be focused on stimulating lower body stuff. And the reason why I kind of separate that is fairly obvious, I think, for endurance athletes. It's the one that carries the highest consequence in terms of impacting my next running workout in a negative way. So, for example, if I were to say go and do a lower body strength session and overdo it a little bit, or I'm doing it earlier on in the season after I've maybe had a little bit more of a layoff, I've ramped it up a little bit too fast or something like that. And then on the schedule, I have short intervals the next day or something like that, which are going to just be a little bit harder to maximize quality under, or a little more challenging. And I come in with some residual fatigue from that lower body strength workout. I sort of have this situation where my secondary workout impacted my primary workout, and I want to avoid some of that stuff. So I'm just a little more particular, especially kind of when I'm phasing in heavier amounts of strength work or building my strength work routine back up during different phases of the year, to be mindful of where I place it in context to the running workouts that I'm going to be doing for that week. The next one is my upper body and core, and I tend to blend these together. So like when I'm doing my core routine and my upper body routine, I tend to do those on the same day, and I'm just a little more flexible about where I'm going to place that, because I'm just less concerned that if I do, say, push-ups or dumbbell presses or something like that, that I'm going to negatively impact my next running workout by going a little overboard on accident, or just carrying on like a reasonable amount of fatigue from any training stimulus into the next when it's upper body versus, a running workout the following day or something like that. So then the other component that I'll have in there is my daily drills or daily exercises. And these are just some movements that I like to try to keep in the rotation on a daily basis. And they're really quick. They take me like 3 minutes, 4 minutes at the most usually to do these drills. And I just find they're very helpful in terms of kind of keeping the patterns of movement open that I want to have available to me, especially when I'm in heavy training phases and I may have like a very one-dimensional component in my running workout. So let's say I'm training for a flat track ultramarathon. That gets very one-dimensional in terms of the mechanics my body's going through if I just focus on those running workouts. So these daily drills or daily exercises just kind of keep sort of like those other patterns of movement or the exaggerated versions of those running mechanic movements a little more available to me, so that if I would, say, have a situation where I jump out onto the trails for a run for the fun of it or something like that, or maybe I just slip and stumble and have to like pivot hard to like a lateral movement or something like that, I'm not just totally blasted by that because I haven't moved my body in that angle or that direction in a while, and just keeping myself a little less available to injuries, I guess we could say, with those. So I'll hit on those as well. All right, so my strength routine, I sort of have 3 primary lower body sessions that I will work through. And there are times where I'll be focusing on 1 or 2 of these 3 more than the others. It just kind of depends on what the race is or where my current strengths and weaknesses are. So an example that would be like kind of like I said before, like a track ultra versus, let's say I'm doing something like Western States where there's a healthy amount of downhill running and I'm maybe a little more concerned about the eccentric load of running than I would be for like a flat surface. But my first lower body exercise routine consists of glute bridges, seated calf raises, Boso ball plank leg lifts, Bulgarian split squats, standing dumbbell calf raises, and resistance band side steps. So those go with the glute bridges. I'll start with no weight and 3 sets of 10 reps. When this becomes kind of easy, I'll switch to single leg and continue to target 3 sets of 10 for each leg. And then when this becomes easy, I can add some weight to it by like placing like a dumbbell or a plate or something like that on my waist to add a little extra resistance on those glute bridges. I'll take about a minute or so between rest for each of those sets. The seated calf raises, I start again with 3 sets of 10. I'll use an amount of weight that is light enough that I could do 2 to 3 extra reps if I needed to. And then I'll add more when I can exceed that 2 to 3 additional reps. Again, I'll take 1, maybe at most 2 minutes in between each of those sets. The Boso ball plank leg lifts, again, 3 sets of 10 with each leg. I'll do all 10 reps with one leg before switching to the other. At first, you might need to rest from one of the plank positions between sets. If so, you can kind of progress towards being able to hold the plank for all 3 sets with those leg lifts. So that's just kind of a progression you can add to it. If you just kind of follow the rule of thumb that none of these sessions should feel like they take you to like total fatigue or failing before you complete the prescription, it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And then once you get to the point where it starts to ease off, then that's the time to kind of add the extra stimulus to it for the progression side of things. The Bulgarian split squats, this is one of my favorites actually. I'll start with 3 sets of 10 reps. When this becomes easy, I'll add weight between like 5 to 10 pound dumbbells or kettlebells in each hand as I'm doing those. And those Bulgarian split squats, essentially I'm just going to use a bench for that. I'm going to brace my trail leg up on that bench and then do those squatting movements down in. I just really like this one because it's single leg focused, but it doesn't have quite the technical skill aspect of, say, like a single leg pistol squat or something like that, where there's a learning curve and a balance and a stabilization component that you have to kind of get up to speed with in order to even do those properly. The Bulgarian split squats target the legs in kind of the running mechanics, single leg at a time, set up without having quite as much of a learning curve. Next is the resistance band side steps. So I'll do 3 sets of 10 with this in both directions. I'll just take a resistance band and I'll do those from side to side. And if it gets easy, I can just get a heavier resistance band to create a harder side step for that. So that's the first lower body session I'll do. The next one is a little more eccentric in focus. So again, this would be one where I'll rotate it in regardless. But if I were to be doing, say, a race with a lot of downhill, or for one reason or another, just assume that the eccentric stuff was a weakness of mine that I wanted to correct, I would maybe phase this one in with a little more frequency. And it starts with an eccentric lunge. So while moving through the lunge movement, I'll focus on going very slow during that lowering phase of the lunge. So like taking a good solid 5 seconds is a good starting target. When I get that form just like really solid, an option is that you can increase difficulty is by adding weight to the lunge with like dumbbells, or kettlebells or something like that. Another thing that you could do with that, if that gets kind of too easy for you, is you could incorporate a jumping lunge movement as you're switching from one leg to the next. Again, though, if you're really wanting to kind of like maximize the eccentric side of things, having that slow 5-second like movement through is still going to be good, even if you're doing that jumping transition. Next is the dumbbell side lunges. So while moving through the side lunge movement, I'll focus on going very slow again with this one. During that lowering phase, again, 5 seconds is a good starting target. And then I'll incorporate a step or a box to step down from. This will actually kind of amplify that eccentric portion of this movement if I find that I'm getting very tolerant of this particular movement. Next are skaters. This is kind of a more dynamic version of a side lunge. I'll perform like a small jump to the right, followed by a small jump to the left while moving through a side lunge movement. So it's sort of kind of like a jumping split squat is like progression of a split squat. This is a skater's kind of a progression of a side lunge. Next is reverse dumbbell lunges. So this movement is similar to those forward lunges, but with the movement being done backwards. So I'll do this into the lunge position, backwards versus forward. While moving through this again, I'll target like that 5-second like transition from the start to the finish there to make it nice and slow. Next is single leg box squat. So I'll keep one leg elevated off the ground in a straight formation with my arms reached out in front, parallel from the floor, and then lower towards the box or bench with a squatting motion for that one. And then finally, I will do some wall squats. So I'll start with 3 sets of about 8 to 10 reps for this. I'll lower into a squatting position with my back against the wall. I'll hold that position for 3 to 4 seconds, then return to a standing position. And then you can always increase time as needed in terms of how long you're holding that static position, or however many reps you're doing too, if you want to add a little bit of difficulty to that. My third and final lower body routine is more of a muscular endurance routine. So this is one that I really like to kind of phase in during my strength plan to do once I kind of get things going. So the thing to consider with these muscular endurance type plans is there is a time when you should avoid them. They can be kind of a progression to a strength routine to some degree if you find that you don't have a very good background in strength work, or you have what they maybe consider like a strength deficiency. So a rule of thumb you could follow here would be like if you were to go onto like a squat rack or like a leg press or something like that, and you were unable to do your body weight. So let's say you had someone who was 150 pounds. If they weren't able to go in that squat rack or that leg press and do 150 pounds, you probably want to improve your just relative strength before jumping into a muscular endurance. Essentially what you're going to do by jumping into a muscular endurance program before you've acquired that sort of relative strength is you're just going to lower the ceiling of the potential benefits you could get from that muscular endurance. And it's just also likely going to be a higher injury risk to do that too. So if someone wants, if you go into like a gym or you start doing some strength work and you notice, okay, I'm not quite up to that point yet in my strength work progression, I would continue with some of the more core foundational strength movements until that is something you can achieve, and then start phasing in the muscular endurance stuff. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're really looking from a performance standpoint, if you're getting to the point where you're kind of like 2xing some of those foundational movements, so the example then would be like that same 150-pound person gets under a squat rack and they can do more than 300 pounds, or they get on the leg press and they can do more than 300 pounds, they actually probably have relatively more strength than would be necessary for optimal performance, and sort of like becoming too good at an alternative activity to really maximize their potential in the running side of things. So that would be something like, I don't think most people probably should be worried about that. If you're a professional athlete perhaps, or someone who's like, I want to really find every last little element of improvement I can get, and you've already turned over like all the big stones and most of the other small stones, and now you're at this point where it's like, okay, well, I might, if I actually like reduce a little bit of strength or get my strength a little more specific to the task at hand that I'm trying to do from an endurance standpoint, I'll get a little faster. That would maybe be a scenario, but generally speaking, this isn't something I'd be all that worried about. But anyway, that's kind of the framework for the muscular endurance input here. And what it consists of is there's 4 key movements: the box step, a front lunge, a split jump squat, and a jump squat. So the box step is 6 by 10 reps with each leg, one leg at a time, and a 1-minute rest between those sets. Then a front lunge. So I'll do 6 by 10 reps with each leg, one leg at a time with 1-minute rest between sets. Split jump squat, 6 by 10 reps with each leg, rotate between legs, 1-minute rest between sets. And then jump squats, 6 by 10 reps with 1-minute rest between sets. That's the general entry point for that muscular endurance routine. You can progress this in a variety of different ways. One would be reducing the rest between sets. It would be a way to increase the load of that training program without actually adding any additional movements to it. The other would be adding symmetric sets, so going from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8. Another option would be sticking with 6, but adding some little bit of extra resistance there. So rather than doing this with body weight, adding, let's say, like maybe starting out with 2.5 pound dumbbells in each hand and then progressing to 5 pound dumbbells in each hand and kind of adding a little bit of extra resistance through that way. So those are just some ways to progress that one. If you find that you have this one in your routine for a while, it's getting pretty easy to the point where like you're not really noticing that it's impacting you at all, or you're just ready to add a little bit of extra stimulus to it if you want to keep driving the adaptations for that sort of thing. So that's the other lower body thing that I'll keep in the routine for those focuses. Here are some discounts and promos for the HPO sponsors. Delta G Ketones has 20% off with BITTER20 promo code, and they also offer free consultations to help you assess how their product would best fit your lifestyles. Head to deltagketones.com. Element Electrolytes has a free sample pack with purchase and satisfaction guarantee, meaning if you don't like it, they will give you your money back, no questions asked, and you don't even have to return the box. Go to drinklmnt.com/HPO to get that free sample pack and try out all their flavors with your purchase. John G Apparel has 10% off with promo code BITTER10. Check out their AFO shorts if you're in the market for a new pair of running or gym shorts. That's johng.com, JANJI.com. S Fuels has a 15% site-wide discount. Go to sfuelsgolonger.com. All links, promos, and discounts can be found in the show notes as well as every episode landing page. Next is that upper body core set of exercises that I will do. So these consist of push-ups, lat pull-downs, overhead press, dumbbell bench rows, and then for core, plank rolls, cable core rotations, weighted Russian twists, and then I'll do leg lifts either with a machine that I can kind of brace myself with my forearms and lift my legs up in that kind of vertical position, or on a bench where I'm kind of laying on my back and raising my legs off of that. So some of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go through them anyway. Push-ups, I'll start with 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps and then progress up from there as I see that get easier and easier. Lat pull-downs, I'll start with 3 sets of 10 reps. I'll use an amount of weight that I could do for 2 to 3 extra reps if I needed, and then I'll add more weight to that when I can able to easily exceed those 2 to 3 extra reps beyond 10. I'll be taking about a minute, maybe up to 2 minutes in between each of those sets. Overhead press, I'll start with 3 sets of 10 reps. I'll use an amount of weight, again, that's light enough that I could do 2 to 3 extra reps if needed, and then add more when I could exceed that 2 to 3, just like the lat pull downs. And I'm usually using dumbbells for this, although sometimes I'll use a machine at the gym if I need to. But again, 1 to 2 minutes in between those sets. Dumbbell bench rows, I'll start, again, 3 sets of 10 reps. Amount of weight I could do with 2 to 3 extra reps, and when I can exceed that, I'll add some more weight, 1 to 2 minutes in between those dumbbell bench rows. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, basically all I'm doing with those is I'm bracing my knee and the same side arm on the bench in a bent over position, and I'm essentially just pulling that dumbbell off the ground in a vertical position while my torso is kind of in a horizontal position. Then I'll move into the core side of things. I'll do plank rolls. So I'll start with 3 sets of 60 seconds, 20 seconds in the front, 20 seconds on the left side, 20 seconds on the right side, with a 60-second rest in between those. And the progression for this one is pretty easy. You can add extra sets, you can add extra time, or kind of like with the muscular endurance routine, you could reduce the rest in between those sets. I'll do cable core rotations. So I'll start with 3 sets of 10 reps on this. I'll use an amount of weight, a resistance that is light enough that I could do 2 to 3 extra reps if I needed to, and then add more when I can exceed that. 2 to 3 extra reps, just like the other ones. 1 to 2 minutes of rest in between those are good. I'm doing that with each side too. So if you go to, this is more of a gym type of movement. Like if you go to the gym, you can get the machines that have the cables that you can adjust the cable height and the weight on that. You could do this with a resistance band too if you don't have access to that. You won't be able to manipulate the weight quite as much with that unless you have a variety of band weights that you can use, but that is an option. Finally, then I'll have the weighted Russian twists. So this one I'll start with 3 sets of 15 reps. I'll do 1 rep is complete after the weight has rotated to each side. So I'm kind of sitting, I'm balancing kind of on my tailbone with my feet elevated and my torso kind of up off the ground, and I'm taking a weight of some kind, usually just like a weighted ball, medicine ball, or you can use a kettlebell or a dumbbell for that matter. And 1 rep is just when you kind of tap the ground on each side, the left side of your hip and the right side of your hip on the ground there next to it. So 3 sets of 15 on that. You can always add weight to progress this one. Again, I'm taking 1 to 2 minutes in between those. And then if I can exceed that 15 reps by more than 2 to 3, that's when I'll add a little bit of extra weight or reduce the recovery time in between each of those sets. Next is the one I was kind of talking about early on, which is those leg lifts. I'll do 3 by 30 reps of this. So either on a machine where I kind of brace my weight with my forearms and am able to elevate my legs from a vertical position, or I'll get on a bench with my legs kind of off the front end of it and my back on the bench and lifting my legs up and down with those 3 sets of 30 with about a minute in between each of those. So that's the upper body core routine that I'll do. Finally, those daily drills that I talked about, and these can be done pretty much daily without negative impact on training as time kind of permits. There are times when I'll actually do this more than once a day. Sometimes I'll actually use these as kind of just a way to break up the day if I'm sitting a lot. If I'm sitting and I'm doing like a bunch of podcast editing or coaching plans and things like that, and I'm just noticing that I'm in the chair for a little bit longer than I'd like, sometimes I'll just get up and do these drills just to kind of like get the blood pumping and kind of move my body in a variety of different movements so they're just not stuck in that same position for too long. But this consists of 10 times leg swings sideways with each leg, 10 by leg swings forward and backwards for each leg, lunges forward and sideways on each leg, each exercise slow and controlled with 5 on each leg in each direction, 20 movements total. And then 10 times body weight squats or 5 times single leg squats on each leg, making sure that my knees stay directly above my foot, similar to the sideways lunge, but with only one leg on the ground so it doesn't stretch your inner thigh area. And then I'll do some crab movements with an elastic band over my lower legs, basically sideways kind of movements that I'll do about 10 of them, very slow and controlled in each direction. And for this one, I'll usually use a little bit of a lighter resistance than I would for those side steps that I was doing in kind of the lower body strength routine. But that's the daily drills. Like I said earlier, they're pretty quick. Once you get them in the rotation, you can find yourself, I think, doing them sometimes a couple times a day just because you got a couple minutes to kill, or you just are sick of sitting or something like that. And it's a good way to get yourself moving a little bit. I'll also sometimes do these like prior to a run or prior to a strength session just to kind of use it as like a warm up, like a dynamic movement type of thing as well. So that's my current kind of strength rotation. Like I said, there's a host of other things that I'll phase in periodically over the course of the year sometimes, or as I'm traveling and don't have access to the equipment that I would have for some of these things, or just to kind of like keep things a little bit more exciting so I don't feel like I'm just rinsing and repeating all the time. But that is kind of the core foundational aspect to it. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.